Every few months, you'll see this claim resurface online. Back in the 1960s, the government gave welfare to black women only if they kicked the man out of the house. It's one of those stories that sounds so dramatic, so painful, that people take it at face value. But the truth, the real story, is both more complicated and more revealing about how policy, economics, and racism collided to reshape the black family. There was a rule like that, but no, it didn't destroy the black family. The destruction came later, and for reasons that are far more systemic. In the 1950s and early 1960s, America had something called the man in the house rule. It applied to poor mothers receiving welfare, specifically the Aid to Families with Dependent Children Program, or AFDC. The rule said that if there was an able-bodied man living in the house, even if he wasn't the woman's husband or even the father of her children, she could be denied benefits.
The man in the house rule was written to prevent welfare cheating, to make sure that aid to families with dependent children would go only to families headed by mothers. But the effect of the man in the house rule is to create for children an atmosphere of investigation and surveillance. And thus, the welfare system in its operation turns out to be a system to make life harder for children.
The welfare system helps the disintegration of the American family. It offers money to families if the fathers will leave them and stay away, in that sense undoing the very stability of the family and taking away one of the two parents the children, of course, need. And what I have seen, I'm afraid to say, all over the country is that the legal system works against the best kind of home for these children.
These men were called substitute fathers. And in many southern states, caseworkers would literally show up at night searching homes for signs of a man's presence: shoes under the bed, shaving cream in the bathroom, or an extra toothbrush in the cup. If they found one, benefits could be cut off immediately. Think about what that did to people's dignity, especially to black families already living under Jim Crow poverty. It wasn't just about money, it was about control. It was about policing morality. And yes, it created fear. Some men did hide or leave during inspections, but this rule didn't apply to married couples. It targeted the poorest, unmarried mothers. In 1968, the Supreme Court case King versus Smith struck down the man in the house rule. The court ruled that the presence of a substitute father, a man with no legal obligation to the children, couldn't be used as an excuse to deny aid.
4 otherwise eligible children were denied welfare payments because their mother was cohabitating with a man within the meaning of an Alabama regulation designed to discourage immorality and illegitimacy. The United States Supreme Court considered the validity of that regulation in the 1968 case King versus Smith. The Social Security Act of 1935 created the Aid to Families with Dependent Children, or AFDC, program. The program provided welfare payments to all dependent children, defined as needy children with a dead, incapacitated, or continually absent parent. Alabama participated in the program, but it had a substitute father regulation in place. The regulation denied AFDC payments to otherwise eligible needy children whose mother cohabitated inside or outside of her and the children's home with any single or married able-bodied man. As used in the regulation, cohabitating meant having frequent or continuing sexual relations. Additionally, the regulation's goal was to discourage immoral sexual behavior and illegitimate births. Mrs. Sylvester Smith was a resident of Dallas County, Alabama, and a mother of 4 children with dead or long-absent fathers. Although the Smith children were otherwise eligible for payments, they were denied AFDC payments solely because Mrs. Smith was having sexual relations with a Mr. Williams on the weekends. Mr. Williams had no legal duty to support the Smith children, and, given that he was married with 9 children, he was neither willing nor financially able to do so. Mrs. Smith filed an action in an Alabama federal district court against Reuben King, the commissioner of the Alabama Department of Pensions and Security, seeking declaratory and injunctive relief. Mrs. Smith challenged the substitute father regulation, on the grounds that it conflicted with the Social Security Act and the Equal Protection Clause. The district court ultimately agreed with Mrs. Smith and entered judgment for her.
So legally, the rule ended right there. But the damage, the psychological, social, and racial damage had already been done. By the time the rule was gone, America was about to enter one of the biggest economic shifts in modern history, and that's when the real decline began. The decline of the black family didn't happen because of welfare checks. It happened because of economic collapse. During the 1970s, America began to deindustrialize. Steel mills closed, auto plants shut down. The kind of blue-collar jobs that had built the black middle class, especially in places like Detroit, Cleveland, and Chicago, vanished almost overnight.
What happened to the American economy in the 1970s was the result both of long-term processes and unexpected shocks. The long-term process was the gradual decline of manufacturing in the U.S. in relation to competing manufacturing in the rest of the world. Part of this was due to American policy. After World War II, you'll remember that we promoted the economic growth of Japan, Germany, South Korea, and Taiwan, ignoring tariffs that they set up to protect nascent industries and effectively subsidizing them by providing for their defense. And then one day, a bunch of Toyotas and Mercedes showed up, and you could drive them up to like 40,000 miles before they would break down, and we were like, wait a second. In 1971, for the first time in the 20th century, America experienced an export trade deficit, importing more goods than it exported.
By the late 1970s, black male unemployment had doubled compared to white men, and when men can't work, marriage declines. That's what sociologist William Julius Wilson called the marriageability crisis. And that's where you get some of the most popular tropes and propaganda presented against black men in present day. Then came the war on drugs and a new wave of policing. Mass incarceration ripped fathers, brothers, and sons out of the community, often for non-violent offenses.
We're going to talk about the war on drugs, a policy initiative that has gone on for years. It was designed, ostensibly, to stop drug use and drug dealing across the United States. But what ended up happening is that it entangled millions of black people in the criminal legal system for generations.
When they came home, they were locked out of employment and housing. So it wasn't that women were kicking men out, it was that men were being locked out by policy, poverty, and by punishment. So where did this black women kick men out for welfare story come from? It came from a small truth turned into a big lie. Yes, welfare agencies punished male presence. Yes, there were men hiding during inspections, but that was a small fraction of households, not the 60% of black families who were married in the early 1960s. But when politicians in the 1980s wanted to cut welfare, they used that image, the welfare queen narrative, to blame poor black mothers instead of addressing racism, unemployment, and systemic inequality.
The stereotype of the so-called welfare queen has been used to demonize those on public assistance for decades. It's a politically potent image depicting an undeserving aid recipient getting rich on the backs of taxpayers. Politicians, including former President Ronald Reagan, have been accused of exploiting this image as a kind of racist dog whistle. Meanwhile, the original welfare queen that Reagan used as a basis for his caricature was based on a real person. The new book, The Queen, tells the story of a woman who went by many names, was accused of many crimes, and whose image as a Cadillac-driving welfare recipient has lived on. Hari Srinivasan recently spoke with the book's author, Josh Levine, about the real-life woman behind the moniker.
Her name was Linda Taylor, and she was identified by the Chicago Tribune in 1974 as a person who had committed welfare fraud while driving fancy cars, including a Cadillac. And very quickly after that, she was given the nickname the Welfare Queen. And it was a nickname and a stereotype that really very quickly blew up.
And so the myth stuck.
Government destroyed the black family by paying black women to be single.
It's a lie of convenience, one that hides the fact that black men were being systemically removed from the economy, not from their homes. Meanwhile, the culture was shifting. The feminist movement, civil rights progress, and rising college enrollment gave black women more independence and opportunity, which is actually something to be celebrated. But combined with the collapsing job market for men, it changed relationship dynamics. Marriage became a choice, not an economic necessity. And when you mix economic strain, mass incarceration, and cultural independence, the traditional family structure naturally weakens. Now let's take a quick walk through history to see exactly when and how these changes happened.
1950s. The man in the house rule quietly took root in welfare offices across America, especially in the South. Caseworkers could deny benefits if an able-bodied man was living in the home, even if he wasn't the father or husband. That policy humiliated thousands of poor black mothers, turning their personal lives into government inspections.
The social worker's here. Oh, shit. Honey, get rid of the TV and hide.
Oh, this is Miss K back, the social worker.
Well, don't just stand there, honey. Let her in.
They haven't sent me the authorization to buy the food stamps for the past 6 months. Because no one...
So you're the gentleman that's been keeping company here.
Is that a gift you're giving to the family? Do you contribute to the support of this whole family?
Whoa, lady. You gonna tell us you can have this set? It didn't cost you in the city a damn dime, but you gonna tell us you can have it, right?
Oh, I didn't make the rules, sir. I'm only doing my job.
He gave me this. He gave me this. He gave us this too, but it don't work.
That's right. Now I have to hide my man in the toilet. Miss Quebec, do you hide your man in the toilet? We know that children need a man in the house. A woman needs a man in the house. We don't insist people be married.
What kind of example is that to set for the children?
Oh, what kind of example are you setting right now?
I ain't the government.
1961, President John F. Kennedy expanded the Aid to Families with Dependent Children program nationwide. More poor families qualified for aid, but government oversight grew even tighter. For black communities, that meant more scrutiny over who lived under one roof. 1965, then came the Moynihan Report, the Negro Family, the case for national action. It described the black family as matriarchal and pathological, blaming single black mothers for social decline. That report cemented the idea that the black family itself was broken, an idea still echoed today. 1968, the Supreme Court's King v. Smith decision struck down the man in the house rule. The court said a substitute father couldn't disqualify a family from aid. On paper, the rule was gone, but in practice, its spirit lingered in welfare offices and housing policies for years. 1970-1973, America's economy began to shift. Factories closed. Steel and auto jobs evaporated. The black working class, once able to sustain families on honest labor, faced massive unemployment. Marriage rates began to fall as economic stability disappeared. 1971, 1975, housing authorities adopted no adult male clauses in many public housing programs. Even though King v. Smith had ended the rule legally, this new policy carried its legacy. If a man stayed overnight, a woman could lose her housing. 1975-1980, the war on drugs began. Policing intensified. Sentencing got harsher. Incarceration rates for black men exploded, often for nonviolent drug possession. Entire families were dismantled, not by welfare checks, but by prison sentences. 1980s. By the time Ronald Reagan took office, the media had created a new symbol, the welfare queen. She became the villain of every political speech, a caricature of a lazy black mother exploiting the system. That image wasn't just racist propaganda, it was psychological warfare designed to turn America against the very people those programs were supposed to help.
And that's how the myth solidified. A policy that began in the 1950s, struck down in 1968, and twisted in the 1980s was used to convince a generation that black women kicked black men out, when in reality, black men were being pushed out by economics, incarceration, and structural neglect. In 1960, about 61% of black adults were married. By 1970, the majority of black families still had two parents. But by the mid-1980s, that number had dropped below 40%. Not because of welfare, not because women kicked men out, but because over time, the system stopped making room for the black man as a husband, a provider, and a father. The no man in the house story has been used for decades to divide the black community, to pit men and women against each other, as if one gender betrayed the other. But when you look at the timeline, the real betrayal came from the top, from policies that criminalized poverty, replaced jobs with prisons, and turned human relationships into eligibility checkboxes. The lesson is simple. The black family didn't fail America. America failed the black family. And now it is our responsibility to tell the real story, not the recycled myth. Peace.